lots of flies crawling around, flying and buzzing. And you can swat them or put fly paper up, but they're always there. When the weather gets warm, the sun comes out and heats the windows. I thought we could talk this morning about something that is brought up frequently by people in meetings or by letter. To give a brief summary first, it is the feeling that one ought to be attentive and aware, because this is what the work seems to be all about, that is what is talked about most of the time. And one can see the reason for it and the importance of it, and yet the inability to be attentive, the constancy of thoughts and feelings and absorption in oneself, self-concern, emotions, fears and wants, makes attention, or seems to make attention, all but impossible. Realizing that at times and then feeling guilty about not doing what one thinks one is supposed to do. Which means listening to talks with a conditioned ear, an ear that is conditioned to hear admonitions, suggestions or precepts, advice and recommendations of what should be. So maybe it all starts with this conditioned listening and looking. Conditioned to hear blame or praise that one is doing well or poorly, and looking at oneself in the light of what one thinks one has heard one should do. So in starting a fresh talk this morning, is it possible that we start talking or listening from not knowing answers, but listening or getting in touch with a problem or problems presented in a letter? I thought I'd first read the whole letter so it doesn't get cut up, and then maybe we can go over it again and talk about certain things, put the magnifying glass over it and look at it in depth maybe. This person has just attended, before writing this letter, had just attended a solitary retreat in a retreat hut furnished by a retreat center. She was on her own there. She was just had the use of that retreat hut. That's what she says here. I stayed 2 nights and a day at the retreat hut in a field corner. She describes where it is. That's unimportant. The quieting was wonderful. No reading, writing, talking. I did listen to one of your tapes on listening. My listening, well, even as I begin this, there's the problem, the my thing. And she goes back. my listening which I don't do well enough, and I wish I would. I wish I would want it more, clarity, truth, presence, simplicity. At the end of the day, I noticed it's simply true. The air of thought goes on, like wind blowing, like rustling leaves, hating that imperfection, in quotation marks, in myself is to hate humanness. The very subtle and pretty constant self-hate, or wish to be better, subtly wounds all the time. I can feel it in my organs, the critical wounding. To hear thought, as you said, to listen to everything that's there, just because it is there, not wanting something out of it, or to go anywhere, to hear thought as one of the countless things occurring. Recently, I'm asking myself, in working, if the goal is not perfection, or doing this excellently. I'm asking myself, I didn't emphasize this right, I'm asking myself in working, if the goal is not perfection, or doing this excellently, then what? Also, what for, or who for this effort? Overworking, pushing to accomplish a lot, are ways of running from ways of going to sleep. I begin to clearly, more and more see this and the addictiveness of the habit pattern. What is this great longing to be drugged, to go away? This morning, the aloneness was a bit frightening. The mind had spun and chattered all night in dreams and wanted to chatter and get busy again. Wanted its defenses back, wanted to put clothes on. Listening is such a bare thing. I notice how I make games for myself to make it more meaningful, to have some taste, underlined, of achieving. Quote, see how the heart is a watery presence and the thoughts are air. Feel that. Feel the simultaneity. Feel the energies, ... end of quote, etc. Then I drop it, noticing the game, words, representations. There are infinite expressions that bubble up for all the inner and outer sensations and insights. Rarely is there open, bare, unclinging being there. Rarely do I let go of me, of my claim on the future. Rarely do I let go of my claim on the future. The most subtle fraction of insight, when the large, bare space, so infinite, so entirely wordless, conceptual-less, silent, entirely unknown, looms. Hunger for that truth, for that perception, seems counterpoised against the whole other world. Why do I make them a conflict? I see ego react instantly to the looming openness. Maybe the truth is in the scathing, unplaceable sequence. Looming, reaction, words, sensation, a new moment of listening, sunshine, clover, cricket, candle, heart-warm black fly. Fear, sadness, anguish come up. I can never pin it down, get it right. So what's the use? Why sit if I revert over and over again to running away? The answer is somehow, I must and I do, twice a day, 10 years now. I feel the gift of it, a certain wisdom, a certain perspective, poise, calm. Sitting made it possible for me to quit drinking alcoholically 10 years ago, and continues to be my teacher and the way that works for me. I feel much appreciation. Dreaming of starting a simple sitting center here. We need one. 2 others may join me and we may begin this next year. Hope all is well with you. Golden days to come sparkle. May the moments bless. The thought, the idea, that there should be perfection. Perfection of what? Of no thought, of constant attention. All of that is thought, isn't it? Perfection itself is the construct of thought. But that thought of needing to be perfect or excellent has an impact on the mind and body, either arousing energies to get to that perfection, or as it eludes one, there are thoughts and emotions and involvement, anger. Then the thought, I'm failing. I'm no good. I can't do it, maybe others can. So the whole movement of comparison with standards, with others, with what one did once. Can that in itself, as it happens in one's moment-to-moment living and listening, can that be heard and seen as an ongoing thing as it goes on? Comparison, the thinking of being excellent, becoming better at something, the thought evoking energies of stimulation or inspiration throughout the body. They're palpable, they can be felt. Or the opposite, the other side of the same thing. The thought, I can't do it, I have failed again, because there was a waking up to a train of involving thought and emotion. I can't do it, and with that the diminishing of energies, what one calls feeling deflated or depressed. All triggered by thought. Can that be seen? Can one be aware of that as awareness comes on its own? That's so difficult to realize because of the way that the thinking mind is conditioned in thinking in terms of cause and effect. It's so difficult to realize that awareness or attention or insight happens on its own. It has no cause that is knowable or known. It happens. If it didn't happen, if awareness didn't happen, or there wasn't a waking up to a train of thought, the train of thought would continue. To being emotionally involved in something that has angered one or frightened the whole body and mind. There is a waking up to that. There is an instant of awareness. which immediately gets cluttered up, or how do you say? It gets buried by these thoughts that have been expressed. I should be able to do it better, or maybe I am not thirsty enough for it. Or as this person here very perceptively writes, the game of words, how one begins to talk about one's discovery, the discovery of endless thought trains, and then finding poetic words for it or philosophical descriptions for it. Very in the beginning, this person says, hating that imperfection in myself is to hate humanness. Why do we say that? It's often said. People say, well, maybe I should just accept what's going on with thoughts and involvement in emotions, emotional states, as human nature, my human nature. And can one observe by listening quietly or wondering, why does one use this word? And what does it do to one, to the state of mind? In saying, with that I hate my humanness. Can one go back from the abstraction, the humanness, which has a definite impact? One can feel better about oneself because one has labeled oneself with an agreeable term. And with that there has been already an escape from the fact that there were thoughts. And why not see just barely factually what is going on? Thoughts like flies, no matter what the methods that may be used to diminish them or get rid of them, they're always there. And it needs no further label away from that bare fact. Or are they always there? Is that already an assumption too? Is that saying too much? Just to see what's there and not conclude from it that it's going to be like that forever, can't be changed, has to be accepted, or must be hated because it's imperfection. Thoughts suggesting that there's a perfect state in which there are no thoughts, constant awareness. It's all thought. And what is the state of mind being, of being or looking, in which no thought is used to comment on thought? In which what has revealed itself in a moment of waking up is just seen for what it is, without making anything out of it. Not elevating the process or denigrating the process, because it's the end of awareness. It's the setting into motion of the whole conditioning apparatus. Needing to label oneself and what one discovers about oneself, and then deriving boosts or depressions from this labeling of oneself or each other. With the label comes the hatred or the infatuation. But to barely, simply wake up to the fact there have been thoughts and add no thought to it. just the sound of the crickets. That's no thought. It's just there. But it can't be heard if thought immediately resumes about imperfection or humanness. Then there's no listening to the sound of the cricket. Someone just recently wrote me a letter. I didn't bring it here, and also came to talk with me, saying that with your talking about awareness, you create guilt in people. So can one look at guilt? It's thinking. One shouldn't be doing what one is doing, or should be doing what one can't do. And with that reflection, which is a process of thinking, reflecting about oneself, a fear of doing wrong, going against someone or something, and maybe fear of punishment, losing out on something, maybe losing the affection of the person one wants to please by doing right. Guilt always has that element of fear of retribution or loss. And while the mind is engaged in this process of, we just described that one can observe it happening, thinking what one should be doing, feeling bad that one is not doing it, and the emotions that come up with it, the fear, trepidation of losing ground, losing someone's affection or approval. As this process, which is complex and involving of thought and sensation and emotion, as that is going on at that moment, there's no listening to the wind and the flies. And yet a compulsion to continue with it, because there is a strong conditioning in the past that to extricate ourselves from an unpleasant problem, we have to think about it. Think our way out of it into a solution, which is to be thought about. When one can observe it, it's amazing. The moment a problem is faced, to start thinking about it and about possible solutions. Thinking. It seems to be the only instrument that's available. One doesn't even question it, whether there may be any other way. And yet the very thing that arouses the guilt is thinking. Thinking about what one should be doing or hasn't done, and then trying through thought to resolve a problem created by thought. It's impossible. Because they're totally limited and self-perpetuating area of conflict. And yet, it serves as a step away, a moving away from the actual facts of what is happening or has happened, which one dislikes, doesn't approve of. Do you see what is meant, what is talked about? That in getting involved with guilt feelings, there is a stepping away, an escape or running away from the bare facts of what has just come into awareness, come to attention. The bare fact being involvement in thought, fantasy, wanting, comparing. And then a moment of attention, and then guilt, which is a perpetuation of thinking, comparing, fearing. And that's how we live. Mostly in those processes, rarely open and with what's actually going on, without any comment, judgment, taking a position, reflecting upon it, just with the flies or the heat, the humidity. In touch with it, part of it. And the amazing realization that no position needs to be taken, even though the whole conditioning process drives this mind and body to take position, for or against. But if that urge, that drive, as it comes up is seen, there is awareness of it, there's also the realization it doesn't have to continue. The security that it seems to imply by thinking about something, that one will get to a point of security, that's an assumption. It doesn't. And one can observe this day in and day out, night in and night out, by this bare attention when it comes on its own. That in thinking and dreaming, there's no security. And yet we think and dream about security or permanency for ourselves. Or our family, people we are associated with, family or friends. Constantly thinking, how can we make ourselves secure, alone and with each other? And a constant rude awakening to the insecurity of all of our thought fabrications. Why can't one begin to live with insecurity? To find out more about it, rather than thought constantly engaged in making what seems insecure secure, never succeeding fully, and therefore either the guilt or the inspiration to maybe I will get it in this way, which is temporary. But to sort of open up vulnerably, wonderingly to what one has labeled insecurity. At the moment one labels it again, one isn't in touch with it. What actually is going on that I call insecurity, and with this immediately have a different level of abstraction which affects me, which affects the whole thinking and feeling, emoting organism. By calling one's state one of insecurity. Rather, putting all of these abstractions, humanness or perfection or insecurity, putting it all aside and getting in touch with the raw material, with the actual momentary state of one's being, and probing into it, listening to it, and witnessing there. The thought wants to explain it all, or wants to make it more poetic or philosophical, and not to fall for that trap. One has seen it. This person who writes this letter is aware of that. So it comes up again, so one sees it and is done with it as the mind wakes up for a moment. It doesn't have to continue with it. It is unmasked at the moment of attention as another escape from the raw facts of one's moment to moment, thinking, feeling, moving, emoting. The writer of the letter says, this awareness is so bare. Is this already a judgment, a fear of not having the richness of words and concepts? Are they sort of the whipped cream of our thinking existence? Is there really bare attention, or the fear that this attention is so bare it has no embellishments, no richness or depth? Is that a thought? Because when awareness is bare of immediately putting into fancy words what is happening to one or the environment, but with openly, vulnerably with what's going on, then the tight little chamber or space in which all this thinking and emoting and worrying and fearing and wanting takes place, in bare attention it opens up to what else is there. Besides this tight capsule of self-concern. Which includes whoever and whatever one is identified with, but still a tight chamber. Bare attention is not restricted or limited to what goes on inside the brain and physical organism. It is an opening without need to get something out of it to what's there. One will say, well, it's not there. I don't have this bare attention. Well, what is it that one has at this instant? There may be thoughts going through the mind like, I don't have it, I don't know how to bring it about. Maybe he has it, but I don't. These thoughts may be going on, or similar thoughts. But there is the sound of the crickets, isn't there, and the feeling of the cool breeze coming through the door. There's some feeling of the musculature, muscles, hard, there's breathing, and maybe pearls of perspiration dropping down. And it's cool in those spots where the perspiration drips, cooler than where it's dry. There are sounds, someone moving, and the rustling of the leaves, the lightness. It's not so difficult to be aware of that, is it? We're using words to communicate with each other about what's going on right now, but the actual sounds and sensations are not words. They're actually happening. They're palpable. And go on and are perceivable whether they are labeled or not. A label can help to identify and know about something, but the identifying of a feeling or sensation and the knowing about it, the recognizing it from past memory, is still not the acuteness of this sensation, this instant. That's there whether it's recognized, labeled, or not. But the labeling can immediately involve the mind in a reaction. I shouldn't be labeling. And then the actual perception of what is being labeled is lost. Then it's again being in the computer room. Knowing, remembering, reacting, and the guilt that is evoked by these reactions. And with all of that, the removal from what is actually going on. And yet, at this instant, it can be a new moment of awareness, perception, directness of all of that which just went on. At that moment, it's not going on, or else there wouldn't be this awareness. It may be as quick and fleeting as the fireflies in June. Boom, bing, a little lighting up and then dark again, lighting up and dark. But why compare it or think about a different duration or state as this is going on? Or as the desire comes up, I want more of that. That was good. Why can't it last longer? Can that thought be heard as it has just gone through the mind in retrospect? Because at a moment of awareness, it's already a thing of the past to have thought, I want that to last forever or longer. And what all is created with that brief thought, I want it to last longer. I don't want it to be so brief. Well, the whole letter deals with it. One doesn't have to do that. One doesn't have to create comparison and guilt by continuing with those thoughts that produce them. They can actually drop and they're seen and understood. And then what is there? Does the mind immediately say, well, what is there? I want something now. Then can this whole drive of wanting something come into awareness? By not getting caught up in what it is that one wants. That thought and projection and making oneself feel good or bad through whatever it is that one projects as a goal of one's wants. But the process of wanting itself, the raw process of wanting, can that come into awareness as the sound of the branches and leaves? Wanting. It is something that is the whole body, every cell and pore of the body is permeated with wanting when that takes place. So it is audible, sensible, tractable or palpable. Wanting. And just to listen to this whole thing of wanting in the presence of the sounds of trees moving in the wind. Not what I shouldn't want or what can I do about wanting, but just listening to it. How the whole body is in a certain state under the sponsorship of the thought of what one wants. And just listen to that without wanting it to end, to go away, or to be understood, just listening to it, feeling it. Listen to wanting without wanting. Is that possible? Without wanting a thing for it or against it? Just the tensions that are involved with it, the whole thing. And allow it to do its thing. It has been triggered by thought. So let the body go through with the whole motion of it, without new thoughts interfering. Thoughts, this is good or this is bad. It interferes with perceiving whatever has been triggered in the past. Maybe the past moment or hours ago or years ago. The writer of the letter says, maybe I don't want clarity enough. I wish I would want it more. Clarity, truth, presence, simplicity. I wish I would want it more. Can there be a listening to what's there? The state of not wanting it, which may be resistance. a fear, a resistance, which comes when we are in conflict with our wants. We want something and we resist it. And then we make an effort not to want it or to want it. Clarity, truth, simplicity. Is that something to want, or does that come on its own when the mind is not in a state of wanting, but listening to whatever states have been elicited, inside and out? Clarity or truth, these are not concepts, these are not thoughts. Or is this all they are? So as the thought comes up, I don't really want that. What's the state of mind and body? Fear of what clarity and truth and simplicity would mean for my future life? Or the sour grapes kind of attitude? I don't really want it, because I'm afraid I'll never get it. Are these movements going on? Movements of thought, feeling? Attachment to something, what one thinks is one's present life. Attachment to the idea of it, and fear that would not continue if there was clarity and truth and simplicity. One can probe into this by asking these questions and then listening, not having an answer, yes or no, but listening. So everything opens up. It doesn't present a solid front of knowledge and ideas, but is aerated by listening. All of oneself being porous to listening and looking inside and outside, not the rigidity and non-transparency of thoughts about oneself, ideas, words, labels. But wondering, what is it really like right now? One can be in touch with it. It's not impossible. The words make it impossible, the ideas, and wanting something else as suggested by the ideas. But what's actually going on is so simple. It's so easily overlooked. Because it's not spectacular. And yet the mind and eye and ear and the senses may be expecting the spectacular, and therefore not in touch with what's utterly simple and inconspicuous. A fly landing on the nose. A thought coming up and evoking something and listening to that and the passing away of it all. when the mind does not want it to be otherwise. We will end here for today.